Anyway, moving forward here, we want to get into more of maybe what to expect, highlights, lowlights, things that could be happening here in the United States in the political realm. And we are honored to be joined here in our first show of 2025 by Briahna Joy Gray, who, amongst other superlatives I could list, is the host of the Bad Faith podcast. Briahna, thanks so much for being back with us.
It's always a pleasure, Eugene and Rania. It's my favorite show to watch. Rania, you were just recently on Bad Faith podcast, and I told you you were my entry point into a whole host of left podcasts, including my bestie, Katie Halper. So it's really a pleasure to be here with you both.
Wow. Okay. See, look at that. Well, it's a pleasure to have you. Let me start here. This is kind of random, but I actually just heard about this morning, so it's on my mind.
Sure.
That President Biden, I guess, is going to give Liz Cheney and I think also Benny Thompson some sort of award, some sort of high-level award for the work that was done on the January 6th commission. And I just said to myself, I mean, there's so many aspects to this, but this feels like why they lost in 2024. And it also just makes me wonder your thoughts around, everyone's thinking we're going into the Trump era, like who knows what's going to happen. Can we really expect much of anything in terms of resistance or pushback or whatever from the Democrats?
Look, I don't think the Democrats are going to stop playing the hits that lost them the election. I had not heard about the Liz Cheney Award, Eugene, but I'm not at all surprised by it. I'll tell you what, I was, watching the YouTubes earlier today, and I came across a video from Pod Save America where Tommy Vitor and Brian Taylor Cohen were doing their 2028 draft pick, what Democrats are most likely to run for office and who they thought should run for office. And can I tell you, that AOC was on the list and on the bottom of the pick. She was literally picked last. And this is, people who know me, I'm not saying this out of some kind of like AOC acolyte fandom or anything, but it's that even in the broad scheme of like the liberal imagination, people who are like friendly, frankly, to AOC, who really think she's quote unquote matured by moving to the center and being more of a partisan Democrat, still don't even put them at the top of their own draft for who they hope run for office. They're backing enthusiastically folks like J.B. Pritzker. There were 2 billionaires on the list. They are, of course, excited about Gavin Newsom. And while there have been these little cracks, right, where you have, Hassan Piker being brought onto Pod Save to talk about, what lessons the left has for the Democratic Party. You have someone like Simone Sanders offering commentary about how, well, there really should be a class analysis, don't you think? Well, gee willikers, maybe you have a point there, Simone, but I think that we're seeing this in spits and starts only, because the reality of the situation is that this is the kind of like mea culpa they'll do in the months or two immediately after an election. And then it's going to be back to business. And they're going to say, yes, we need to resist. The threat of Donald Trump is horrible, but we're going to see the very traditional kinds of resistance that we have seen since time immemorial. One caveat, though, I do think some interesting opportunities for populism more broadly exist, because we've already seen some signs that the Trump coalition, kind of populist coalition that's been dealing with a lot of faux populism, as I know we've all talked about on our shows, is cracking as these sort of corporatists are betraying certain promises around the immigration debate and the H-1B visa debate, and revealing themselves to be, in many respects, the faux populists we've always called them out to being, to the parts of their base that I think have a more sincere desire to actually have some baseline bedrock protectionist social safety programs for the American citizen. And I do wonder what that's going to look like, and if that fracture continues to happen, and if there are any opportunities for gains for the left there.
I also think that we're beginning a year after, I don't know how you'd phrase it, but it's just kind of like, seems like the end of the era of the squad, because at least a couple of them have been pushed out, right? AOC has really folded into the Democratic Party, even if she's still on the progressive end of it. And then what's left is sort of these voices in the wilderness, like Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib. And all that said, I mean, I feel like that was an experiment that didn't work out. The idea of, like these handful of progressives can really change this party from the inside. And now that that is gone, is there a check, or is there a progressive even end of the Democratic Party? Like, what's left in that? Or is it just this full on, the right wing of the party essentially eat it up and win? And then where does that leave, I guess, progressives moving forward? Like, are Democrats really going to still be able, I know you don't necessarily have the answers to all these questions, but I'd love your opinion. Are Democrats really going to still be able? Yeah. Are they still going to be able to like remembering?
Screw that. I have a couple of answers for you, Rania, because I'm sorry, this is kind of like, Look. I'm not going to say I told you so and I'm Nostradamus and I knew it was all going to play out this way. But I had an inkling, right? And not to be that girl, but we were having this conversation at the beginning of Biden's term around what role the squad could play. I'm sorry about force the vote, because this was an opportunity to demonstrate what even having a very small number of squad members could do to force the issue. In that instance, the argument was don't vote for Nancy Pelosi to be Speaker of the House unless you get certain concessions. We saw 2 years later, Republicans use this exact same strategy to force successfully a number of concessions. And so at that moment, it seemed like the writing was on the wall that when we have evidence that the squad can do something with the numbers that they had, they were unwilling to do so and were fundamentally never going to be adversarial. And then over the course of 2021, we saw them decline to fight for a $15 minimum wage. We saw them basically fold and not hold the line when the Democrats bifurcated all of the social spending out of the Build Back Better plan. And it's been 2 years since they even had to come up with excuses for why they're not going to do anything, because they haven't had control of Congress anymore. So even if people were hopeful that the squad would do better, I certainly was hopeful that the squad would do better. I sort of cringe when I go back and watch clips of me interviewing AOC at South by in 2019, obsequiously fawning over how promising I thought she was going to be, right? But the reality of the situation is it's very difficult to continue to pretend that an inside strategy works. So then what's the alternative? The alternative is the left has to start talking seriously about what it means to build up third parties, alternate sources of political power, in addition to, of course, investing in labor power. That is the story. That's been the writing on the wall for a very long time. And I know a lot of people are squeamish about the fact that they'll say the Green Party isn't strong enough. It needs a lot of work. It needs fortification. It needs fresh blood. All of that is true. But you have to ask yourself whether or not the Democratic Party is more likely to get rid of their gerontocracy, or the Green Party is open to actually being transformed from within, with thousands and thousands of leftists who all dutifully joined DSA and were so excited to support Bernie's 2 campaigns and so excited to support AOC and the rest. And who now could be putting their efforts toward a party and a political system, or inventing a new party, I don't really care, but one that actually is designed to be invested in their interests, as opposed to being designed to literally go on the attack against anybody who would threaten the corporate duopoly.
No, it's a great point. Abraham Lincoln, third-party candidate, very successful.
100%.
But, if we were to go back in time to 1850, people said the exact same thing about third-party politics then. But we see...
I actually just did an episode with Matt Karp, who's a Princeton historian of the antebellum period, about this exact issue, and to frame out for me the historical context that enabled Abraham Lincoln to start the Republican Party, or put the Republican Party on the map and become a winning third-party candidate, and to analogize it to the situation that we had today. And we have a difference of opinion as to like how plausible that is and whether it's going to work out. But I think a lot of what he was saying basically validates my view.
Yeah,
but I encourage people to go listen for themselves.
Yeah, having not seen it, I bet you are right. So I'm just going to accept that. But I think it's an interesting. There's so many different elements to this, and I'm glad you brought up the issue of leverage, because of course we've already seen one issue at the end of the year, continuing resolution. We've got the debt ceiling thing that's coming up, and I guess I don't know. This is sort of a weird connection that I'm making here, because I'm also not really expecting the Democrats to do anything, and I think somehow the Republicans will resolve their debt ceiling issues, and the Democrats will get nothing out of it. But I was talking to my grandmother about this over the course of Christmas, and okay, we have Hakeem Jeffries in there, a black guy from Brooklyn, Hakeem Jeffries. Just how low the sights of black politics have been lowered. There's always been a lot of moderates and people who are bad or whatever, but I don't know. It feels just unbelievable to me to have so many black people in these positions, coming from deeply black historic neighborhoods all across our country with so much history, and they can offer nothing essentially in terms of political vision. I don't know what I'm saying there. Maybe I'm just asking you to comment on that, but it really was just, we were both lamenting it, my grandmother and I, how we had even gotten here.
Well, props to you for having a woke grandmother, because first of all, I recently discovered, fun fact, that I'm apparently related to Hakeem Jeffries. He's got a bunch of Cleveland family, not related by blood, but we share cousins. So I'm hoping not to run into him at any family reunions. But that aside, Eugene, I can't believe that you're not satisfied by the fact that we have a minority leader who can rap Jay-Z lyrics, a real Gen X hip hop king to be the conduit for our Black American interests. Eugene, like, what do you want, a pound of flesh? This is the true limit of Black politics. This is the height. This is the zenith that we can reach. And I don't understand what more you want. Someone who actually represents the interest of his constituents. Eugene. This is 2025, not a time for utopias. Grow up, Eugene. No, look, I will say this. I do think a lot more Black people are upset. Like, I come from a very progressive family. My mother, she likes to say that Obama was the only Democrat she ever voted for. She voted Green her whole life, but Obama still got her, right? And I sometimes remind her, Mom, remember when your house key had like Obama on it? Like, remember how you could get like Obama like coating on the decorative items?
Yes.
Like, we were all kind of caught up. And I do think that, we've been through a time where criticizing Obama got you ostracized. I recently talked to Tabitha Smiley on my podcast, and we were going over that a little bit. Like Cornel West, obviously, there's a whole category of Black people who were right at the time when nobody wanted to hear it. And I think we, thankfully, are moving into a different era where, most people recognize that the representational politics that have been spoon-fed to historically marginalized groups in this country, specifically Black people, since time immemorial, just isn't cutting it. The question is, now that everyone's like sort of on the same page and sort of wanting something more, what obstacles still are being presented to these progressive candidates that are genuinely progressive candidates to getting into office? And of course, we've seen over the last years how effective AIPAC in particular as a lobbying group has been weaponized specifically against progressive Black lawmakers. Like, that is a part of the story that should not be overlooked. It seems to be either easier for them to malign Black lawmakers or prospective lawmakers as anti-Semitic, or simply they are the ones that happen to have politics that are more aligned with the interests of Palestinians and more willing to speak out, perhaps because of our shared history of oppression, and they become the targets. And so I would love to see a world where someone like Nina Turner isn't able to be so railroaded, where Jamal Bowman isn't able to be so railroaded on that particular front. Because Black people start to get angry about the fact that in these predominantly Black areas of the country, their politics are being written by a lobbying group for a foreign country. That, to me, would be the kind of progress that I would hope to see percolating over the course of 2025, a development of Black political consciousness. And if your grandmother is any indication, Eugene, maybe we're on the right track.
I have one last thing I want to ask you about here, and maybe this is like I don't know. There has been an attempt, I feel like, by Republicans to, especially with the Trump movement, to, even though they're still white dominated, to like reach out to minorities. And then a lot was made, and I don't know if the numbers actually tell that story, but a lot was made how there was like maybe a slight uptick in certain voters, like more Latinos voted for Trump than last time around, or more Black people did. And obviously you do have some figures, like Candace Owens comes to mind, for example, who is quite good, I think, at like selling conservative politics to, I don't know if she's good at selling it to Black people, but she's good at selling it as a Black woman, right? So I guess my question for you is, after what we've witnessed with the Democratic Party just kind of like collapsing into failure in the last election, do you see that shift at all? I'm not necessarily saying all these Black people are going to become Republicans, but
no, look, the expression like throwing a monkey wrench into the machinery exists for a reason. It's because it is a feature of the human experience that when you feel like things are going awry and things are going poorly, sometimes you just want to F stuff up and see what happens, because it feels like there's no bottom. And you can sit here and intellectualize with me and say things can always get worse. Don't be an accelerationist, yada, yada, yada. And I might even agree with you. But at the end of the day, we all know that's not how kind of the human experience and consciousness works. And people see themselves feeling disrespected and ignored by the Democratic Party. You saw the Sean O'Brien commentary from last week about how dismissive Kamala Harris was, and ended their interview very shortly and said, "You're going to vote for me no matter what." And even though like we want logically people to rise above and just represent the interest and not care about the personalities and all of that stuff, the reality is that that's just not how the world works. And I was frustrated with Bernie because when it was reported that, people didn't, pastors didn't want to tell their flock to vote for him because he wouldn't call people and wish them happy birthday and shake their hands. And do I think that's superficial and dumb and you shouldn't have to wish people happy birthday and glad hand? Yes, but it is what it is. And if we can win in South Carolina, and if we can get Bernie Sanders into office, and we can have universal health care because you wish someone a happy birthday, well, that's not half the selling out that most people want you to do. So wish someone a cocked a happy birthday. Do you know what I'm saying? And it's the same here with Kamala Harris to a much more significant degree, and the Democratic Party to a much more significant degree that's been really taking its voters for granted. And really, and this shouldn't be forgotten, really argued openly for years. I would say like during the tail end of the Obama years up until through the early Trump years, that it was this demographics is destiny argument. I wrote about it a lot when I was back at The Intercept. The Democratic strategists really believed that the browning of America, that was the name of one of these operatives' books, the browning of America was going to default into Democratic victories without them ever having to try. And I think that's why you get Schumer saying the thing about for every vote that we lose in Pennsylvania, we pick up one in the rural, whatever, the rural part of the state, et cetera, et cetera. They really just thought that every brown person, every black person in the country was going to continue to vote for Democrats because, I don't know, the Civil Rights Act, which I don't mean to be flippant, dismissive of it, but people are living with contemporary concerns. And I heard you guys talking about inflation and all of these things with the previous guest, and I don't want to belabor those kinds of points, but at a certain point it's really insulting to expect someone to be, expect a party to get by coasting off of the successes of folks that fought 3 generations prior. So yeah, you're right. Black and brown people, they might not necessarily become Republicans, but the game Republicans play is getting people to stay at home. They did so very effectively. Me personally, of course, I was going to vote for a third party candidate. I voted for Jill Stein and Butch Ware. And I think you're going to see more and more of that. Now, but that, again, is an opportunity for the left. I think a lot of Black people don't want to vote for Trump. They do think that he's a racist. They do have all of these problems with him, but they want to register a protest vote. And I think it is really important that people know that the duopoly is not, a truth that was handed down on a tablet from God, but something that we have chosen and we designed for ourselves in our society, and that we should be fighting for an alternative.
No, I think it's a good point. I mean, I'm not much of a Christian, but I think God actually said, pick your leaders amongst yourselves. But we're not going to get into the Old Testament here or that much. Listen, well, we could actually if you want to, but I think that this is not the podcast for that. There's an argument for
Christian socialism paving the way. I'm planning an episode on that too, so hey, you never know.
Well, listen, hey, Bad Faith Podcast is a much see, much listen. If everyone is not following it, I don't know what you're doing. Start already. Briahna, as always, it is an honor to have you here with us on the Freedom Side.
It's such a pleasure. Thanks, guys. See you soon.